The Cursed King and the Dragon Tree.
Written by Diana Claremont.
Sophia Forester was supposed to live a quiet life, her gift a secret shared only with the strange creatures of the forest. Now, the alpha of her pack, with her own father's blessing, has declared her a blight and sentenced her to become the one thing that might save their dying lands, a human sacrifice. Her fate lies with her executioner, Alpha King Julian Darkholme, the most powerful and tormented leader in the land, a man bound to a demon that craves her destruction. She'll need every secret the spirits can whisper just to survive until the harvest moon. Yet with every day that passes, the blight on the land worsens, the kingdom's ancient magic is failing, and the demonic whispers grow louder. Even worse, Sophia begins to suspect the curse isn't what it seems, and that the real monster isn't the man she was sent to die for. Everyone in the cursed court of Darkholme has an agenda, because once you are named the sacrifice, there are only two ways out: fulfill the prophecy or die fighting it.
Chapter 1. Sophia. The bonfire smoke stung my eyes, though that was nothing compared to the burning shame of standing before my entire pack like some criminal awaiting sentencing. Everyone had crowded into the clearing. I could feel their judgment pressing against my skin. I kept my head down and traced the worn embroidery on my dress over and over, my fingernail catching on a loose thread. My inner wolf paced restlessly, and I had to fight to keep her contained. Don't look up, I told myself. Just breathe through it. I tried to imagine I was somewhere else, anywhere else, like that mossy spot by Silver Creek where tiny water dryads would dance between the reeds at twilight. At least they never whispered blight when I walked past, unlike certain members of my pack who thought they were being subtle. Alpha Marcus's voice boomed across the clearing, making several people flinch. The blight worsens with each passing day. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight I thought I might be sick. Here we go. Another public shaming disguised as a pack meeting. He continued. Our prey grows sick before we can hunt it. The crops wither no matter how much we tend them. Even our border wards have begun to fail. He let that sink in. Let the fear ripple through the crowd like wind through wheat. And I knew exactly where that fear would land, right at my feet, where it always did. I couldn't help myself. I glanced up just enough to see my father standing beside Marcus, his beta insignia gleaming in the firelight. Dad stood there like a statue, his whole body rigid with tension, refusing to look in my direction. Come on, Dad, I silently begged. Look at me. Tell them it's not my fault. Tell them something, anything. But his gaze remained fixed on some point above my head. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. Looking at his own daughter had apparently become too painful to bear. Mom stood further back in the crowd, her face drained of color as she gripped my younger brother's shoulder hard enough to make him squirm. At least he just looked confused and frightened rather than disgusted. Give it time, though. He'd learn to hate me like the rest of them. Marcus said, "We all know the source of this misfortune," his voice dropping into that low, threatening growl he perfected over the years. The entire pack shifted as one, 100 pairs of eyes turning to find me like compass needles finding Morth. The accusations didn't need to be spoken aloud anymore. We'd all memorized the script. Failed hunt? Sophia must have spooked the deer with her strange muttering. Sick calf? Well, Sophia touched the fence post yesterday, didn't she? Rotten apples? That girl walked through the orchard at noon. What did you expect? My throat constricted as the familiar frustration welled up. If only they knew what I really saw. That muttering they complained about? I'd been trying to calm a terrified spirit that got lost near the deer's path, its panic driving the animals away. The fence post incident? I'd felt the sickness seeping up from the poisoned groundwater beneath the calf pen, and I was trying to trace its source. And my walk through the orchard had been following the pleas of the apple tree dryads as they begged for someone to notice the rot spreading through the soil. But explaining any of this would be worse than pointless. The one time I'd tried, they'd called me a witch who consorted with evil shadows, comparing me to the cursed wolves of Darkholme pack. As if on cue, Marcus's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. We cannot, we will not, follow Darkholme pack down their path of ruin. Their lands have become wastelands. Their Alpha, Julian, bears a curse that has destroyed everything he touches. A collective shudder ran through the pack, accompanied by whispers of horror. Darkholme was our cautionary tale, the bedtime story parents used to frighten misbehaving pups. Just the name made grown wolves nervous. My blood iced in my veins. Why was he bringing up Darkholme now? Marcus announced. After much deliberation, we have negotiated a solution, and I could hear the grim satisfaction threading through his words. A pact that may appease whatever angered spirits ravage both our territories. His eyes finally found mine, hard and pitiless. Sophia Forester, blight upon this pack, will be given to Alpha Julian Darkholme as an offering. The sacrificial ceremony will take place at the harvest moon, 3 weeks from now. May the goddess have mercy on her soul. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the crack and pop of the bonfire. Then came the exhale, not of shock, but of relief. I felt it wash over the crowd like a wave, this palpable sense of a problem finally being solved. The scapegoat had been chosen, the sacrifice named, and it wasn't anyone they care about. My inner wolf howled in rage and terror, throwing herself against the cage of my self-control, but my body had gone completely numb. This couldn't be real. They wouldn't actually hand me over like that. I was the beta's daughter. I looked desperately at my father, searching for any sign that he would object, that he would remember I was his daughter before I was the pack's convenient excuse for everything that went wrong. When his gaze finally met mine, I saw it, just for a heartbeat, raw anguish flickering in his eyes. Then his expression shuttered closed, transforming back into the beta's mask of duty and resolve. He looked away. He'd agreed to this. My own father had signed my death warrant. The betrayal cut deeper than any claw ever could. Mom stifled a sob against my brother's hair, turning her face away so she wouldn't have to watch. My brother stared at me with those wide, innocent eyes, not understanding why his sister was being sent away to die in some cursed wasteland. 2 enforcers stepped forward, Marcus's muscle, built like brick walls and about as sympathetic. They didn't bother with final words or gentle handling, they just grabbed my arms with practiced efficiency. I didn't fight. What would be the point? Even if I managed to break free, the entire pack would hunt me down before I reached the tree line. The numbness was almost a mercy now, cushioning me from the full weight of what was happening. They bound my wrists and ankles with rope that had probably last been used on actual livestock, the coarse fibers biting into my skin. Can't have the sacrifice running off before delivery, after all. As they marched me toward the cart, an actual cart, like I was cargo, I scanned the faces of packmates I'd known my entire life. People who'd watched me grow up, who'd eaten at our table, whose children I'd played with. Every single one looked away. They weren't just exiling me. They were rewriting history so that I'd always been a problem, never a real person that mattered. My gift, the ability to see and hear what they couldn't, had always frightened them, and now they had finally got an excuse to get rid of me. As I stumbled over the uneven ground, the enforcers basically threw me into the cart bed, and the one securing the tailgate wouldn't even look at me as he checked the lock. The driver clicked his tongue to the horses, and the cart lurched forward with a jolt that sent me sliding across the rough planks. I twisted around despite the rope cutting into my wrists, needing one last look at the only home I'd ever known. The Redwood Pack compound was already shrinking behind us, lit by the bonfire like some perverse farewell party. My father stood silhouetted against the flames, but he wasn't watching the cart leave. He was still staring at the spot where I'd been standing. The cart wheels crunched over gravel, then transitioned to the softer sounds of the forest path. We were heading toward the Darkholme border, toward Alpha Julian and his dying lands. The numbness that had protected me began to crack like ice in spring, letting in trickles of pure terror. The air grew colder as we traveled, the familiar scent of moss and pine gradually giving way to something else, something that smelled like sickness and rotting leaves. This was really happening. They were really going to hand me over to a cursed alpha and wash their hands of me. I slumped against the side of the cart, feeling the fight drain out of me as the reality sank in. The injustice of it all sat like a stone in my chest. But beneath the terror and betrayal, something else stirred, a tiny spark of defiance. They called me a witch. They blamed me for everything that went wrong. But I could see things they couldn't, hear voices they were deaf to. Maybe that made me cursed. Or maybe it made me the only one who could understand what was really happening to our lands. I stared into the darkening forest, where shadows moved between the trees, some natural, some definitely not. The shadows reminded me of where I was headed, toward the one I was meant to face, Alpha King Julian Darkholme. My stomach twisted with a mix of fear and revulsion. The stories about him surged through my mind, how his touch was said to wither all it met, how cruelty and madness consumed him after his curse awakened several years ago. A monster like him wouldn't just give me a quick end. No. He'd draw it out, toying with me like a cat with a mouse, savoring every one of my screams before the final blow. Darker thoughts crept in. Would he force himself on me to mark me as his, before bringing the end? The idea of those cursed hands on my body made my skin crawl. Then, just as fear had overtaken me, rage suddenly surged in to take its place. If the cursed king wants blood to flow, he'll have it, but it won't be mine.
Chapter 2. Julian. The rotting wood crumbles beneath my fingers, decay spreading in dark veins across the ancient desk. I've watched it happen countless times, but it never gets easier. Everything I touch dies. That's been my reality for 5 years, ever since my father died at the harvest feast. Along with his death came 2 poisoned gifts, the leadership of a dying pack and a demon that took residence in my body. Darius stands close to the doorway, 10 feet away. The distance isn't arbitrary. The scars on his left hand remind us both that my touch brings only death. Food stores are holding steady for now, Alpha, he says, his formal tone barely masking his fear. The southern farms brought in enough grain before the blight reached them, though we'll need to ration through winter. The wells on the eastern border are still producing clean water, and— "Just tell me the death count, Darius," I interrupted him. I hated how he always tried to coddle me like a child, manipulating the facts to show that our situation was not as dire. The demon stirs in my mind, its voice like oil on water. 43 souls, the demon anticipates. How many of them infants? How many mothers will never see their children again, all because you refuse to embrace what you are? 43, Lord, Darius confirms. His Adam's apple bobs as he swallows hard, knowing what this means. At this rate, our pack won't survive another year. The demon claws at my consciousness, stronger now that exhaustion has worn down my defenses. "This power is your birthright," it hisses. "Every death feeds us. You pretend to hate it, but I know you feel the rush when they bow in fear, when they whisper prayers to their moon goddess to save them from you." I force it back, though containing it feels like trying to hold back a flood with bare hands. My father made his choice when he bargained with this demon for power. I'd be damned if I give this demon what it wants, even if denying it kills me. "Lord Alpha!" Darius's voice cuts through the demon's snarling. "There's also the matter of the witch girl from Redwood Pack, the one the council selected." "Ah yes, the sacrificial lamb. The council clings to an ancient prophecy like drowning men to driftwood. A hunger with a crown holds all in pyre. Salvation's found at harvest moon, when the blood that sees makes the fire bloom." Nonsense. These fools believe her death under the harvest moon will break my curse, but I know better. We've already tried everything. More innocent blood? What for? Our territory is already soaked with it. But what other choice remains? I've thrown fortunes at seers that could not do anything to stop this slaughter. "When does she arrive?" I ask, though I already know. The demon's restlessness pulses through my veins like poison. She's near, it purrs, its voice thick with anticipation. Young, untouched, Such power she carries, buried deep where even she can't see it. When we claim her, you'll understand why your father embraced the darkness. Within the hour, Alpha, Darius says, his words clipped with tension. The escort reports they've crossed our boundaries. I approach the window, careful to keep inches between my skin and the ancient stone walls. We can barely feed our people. We can't waste resources repairing more decay. The main road stretches before me like a scar through our dead fields. The procession appears, 6 mounted guards forming a protective circle around a small cart with a lone passenger. She's smaller than I imagined, but something about her sets her apart. Most sacrifices arrive either fighting their captors or drugged into submission. This one stands tall, her eyes taking in everything. Our crumbling fortress, the withered gardens, the guards who won't meet her gaze. There are no tears, no pleas. She's assessing, calculating. Yes, the demon stirs, its interest sharp and focused. This one is different. Put her in the tower room, I ordered Darius. Sir, the counselors insisted the dungeons would be more. The tower room, I cut him off. And make this absolutely clear, no one goes near her without my explicit permission. No one touches her, speaks to her, or even breathes in her direction. Is that understood? I know too well what happens to helpless girls in dungeons when guards grow bored. My curse may make me a monster, but I won't add that particular horror to my conscience. If she must die for my father's bargain, she'll at least die with dignity. How touching, the demon sneers, growing attached to something just to destroy it yourself. Yes, Alpha, I'll handle it personally, Darius says, backing away. I watch as they lead her through our rusted gates. The demon writhes inside me, not with its usual mindless hunger, but with something more focused, more dangerous. The wood beneath my palm begins to smoke. As if sensing it, she looks up, her eyes finding mine through the tower window. Even from this distance, I see the steel in her gaze, the complete absence of fear in her sharp features. Something shifts in my chest, unfamiliar and raw. The wood bursts into flames. I jerk back, shaking off fire that clings like living vines. When I look again, she's disappeared inside. The demon's laughter echoes in my skull. I pull on my gloves, silver-lined leather, one of the few things that can contain my curse, and head for the door. I need to understand why the demon wants her so badly before it acts on its hunger.
Chapter 3. Sophia. The heavy oak door closed behind me with a deep thud that echoed through my new chambers. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart as I surveyed my prison. The room was grand in the way old castles always are, all faded battle tapestries and elaborate stonework, but the massive fireplace did nothing to ward off the bone-deep chill that seemed to radiate from the walls themselves. My wolf stirred restlessly beneath my skin, making my chest tight with anxiety. The isolation was almost worse than the hostile crowd I'd faced earlier. Here there were no accusing stares, just endless silence and towering stone walls that made Darkholme feel like it was slowly crushing me. I couldn't afford to give in to fear, though, not with the harvest moon only weeks away. They brought me here to die, but I refused to accept that fate. I'd already survived the harrowing journey here, past crumbling outer walls and guards who looked at me like I was their next meal. Even catching a glimpse of him hadn't broken me, Alpha Julian Darkholme, watching from a high window as they rushed me inside, his broad shoulders and dark hair unmistakable, my supposed executioner. But I wouldn't let him decide my fate. For 3 nights, I studied the guards' movements like a hunter learning prey patterns, though in this case I was the prey. Their routines never varied. Heavy boots on stone at precise intervals, passing my door without lingering. They were confident in the fortress-thick door and dizzying tower height. But my wolf's restless energy drove me to explore, to understand every detail of my surroundings. On the 4th night, I pressed my ear against the cold wood door and listened. In the deep silence, my gift tingled, Not a warning exactly, but an awareness of spirits unlike any I'd known before. These weren't the friendly earth spirits or shy dryads of my home territory. These were ancient, fated things that clung to the stones. Years of sneaking out to Silver Creek had taught me useful skills, including how to pick locks. Even so, my heart pounded as I worked the hairpin into the ancient mechanism. Each tiny click seemed to echo through the silence like a thunderclap. When the lock finally gave way, I slipped into the dark corridor like a shadow. I moved silently on bare feet, using my spirit sight to navigate. A faint silver thread, the path of a lonely hearth spirit, guided me down one passage, while the oily darkness of something far more sinister made me quickly backtrack from another. Slowly, I built a mental map, left at the helmless suit of armor, right at the suspicious bloodstain on the tapestry, down the spiral staircase that creaked like a living thing beneath my feet. The deeper I explored, the more Darkholme's decay became apparent. Mortar crumbled between ancient stones, and dark patches of damp spread across the walls like festering wounds. The castle seemed to be slowly dying, much like my home territory of Redwood, but here the rot ran deeper, more desperate. I spent my nights mapping escape routes, each careful step building my determination. This wasn't just about staying alive anymore. I needed to find a weakness in the fortress. A forgotten drainage tunnel, a section of wall where guards grew lazy. But after days of searching, I found nothing but more stone and iron. Still, every fortress had its weak point. Then one night, everything changed. A current of sweet, fresh air cut through the castle's musty decay, leading me to an unguarded side door. When I pushed it open, I stepped into what felt like another world entirely. The night sky stretched endlessly overhead, scattered with more stars than I'd ever seen. The courtyard spread out before me, enclosed by towering walls that had partially crumbled with age. But what caught my breath was the structure at its center, a massive greenhouse made of delicate glass and intricate ironwork, glowing softly under the starlight. Powerful wards shimmered around it, humming with protective magic. Unlike the heavy, oppressive energy of the castle, the greenhouse radiated pure, vibrant life force. The contrast was so stark it felt like breaking through dark water into sudden sunlight. Staying close to the shadows along the wall, I crept closer. Through the fogged glass, I saw something that made me forget to breathe, a dragon tree. I'd only read about them in ancient botanical texts, but there was no mistaking that distinctive scaled bark. Legend said these trees grew from the hearts of fallen dragons, their spirits forever bound within the living wood. Finding one here, in this decaying fortress, made no sense. These were sacred trees that belonged in hallowed groves, but as I looked closer, my wonder turned to dismay. The tree's leaves, which should have shown an otherworldly emerald, were dull and brown at the edges. Its scaled bark was flaking away in patches. Like everything else in Darkholme, this magnificent creature was dying. A flash of movement caught my eye. Near the greenhouse entrance, a fairy no taller than my hand darted through the air on delicate moth-like wings. Its skin gleamed like mother of pearl in the starlight as it tended to the wards with obvious desperation, tiny face drawn with concentration. As I watched, its wings drooped with exhaustion. My heart nearly stopped when I saw what the fairy was defending against, a troll, hunched and muscled, its 3-foot frame reeking of swamp rot. Its yellow eyes gleamed with malice as thick fingers scrabbled at the magical barrier. Though small for its kind, the creature's every blow made the wards flicker dangerously. The fairy squeaked in terror, pouring more energy into the failing barrier, its tiny body shaking with effort. Something fierce and protective ignited in my chest as I watched the tiny guardian fighting to protect the tree. My wolf stirred, sharing my anger at the sight of this brutal creature threatening something so pure. Without thinking, I recalled a lesson from Anya, a dryad who'd once taught me a repelling charm for pests, big or small, in the Whispering Woods. The castle's decay made channeling magic feel like wading through mud, but the greenhouse's clean energy helped me focus. I gathered what power I could, visualizing the troll being thrown backward by an invisible force. Tashka, I whispered the ancient dryadic word. The troll let out a wet yelp as it flew backward, landing hard. Yellow eyes blinked in confusion before narrowing with rage. It sniffed the air and scanned the courtyard while I pressed deeper into the shadows, my heart pounding. After one final angry swipe at the air, it lumbered away into the darkness, leaving only silence behind. The fairy hovered in place, trembling, its luminous eyes wide with disbelief. Slowly, it floated toward my hiding spot, stopping a few feet away at eye level. I could see every delicate pattern on its moth-like wings as it drifted closer. You banished the troll?" It chirped, voice filled with wonder. "Just a simple charm," I said, trying to steady my shaking hands. "Are you all right?" The fairy streaked toward me in a flash of green light, circling my head and leaving trails of sparkles in its wake. "All right? I'm magnificent, thanks to you." It landed on my shoulder, its tiny body radiating warmth. "That brute has been weakening my wards for weeks, trying to reach the dragon tree." "The tree looks sick," I said softly, studying the browning leaves. The fairy's glow dimmed. "The curse feeds on life, stealing it bit by bit." It touched my cheek with a surprisingly solid hand. "But you helped me." The fairy flew back to the ward symbols etched into the ground. Its humming filled the air, and the symbols blazed with golden light. They peeled away from the stone like autumn leaves caught in a breeze, swirling around me before settling into a shimmering lattice just above my skin. The magic felt like stepping into warm sunlight after being submerged in icy water. "There," the adorable creature announced triumphantly, settling back on my shoulder. "A shield ward against dark magic. The strongest I can make." The warmth of the ward was incredible, pushing back the castle's bone-deep chill. "Thank you. I'm Sophia," I told the tiny guardian. "And I am Pip, keeper of the verdant heart." He puffed up proudly, his light pulsing brighter. "Now friend to Sophia the Defender. Would you like to meet the dragon tree?" I gazed at the beautiful tree with its sleeping spirit, watching death creep through its leaves. "Yes," I said softly. Pip trilled with excitement and gestured toward the greenhouse door. The complex wards parted at his command, opening just wide enough for me to step through. As I crossed the threshold, I entered what felt like another world entirely. Warm, humid air enveloped me, rich with the scent of earth and flowers, and something else, a spicy cinnamon aroma that could only be coming from the dragon tree itself. The sheer concentration of life energy made my head spin. I approached the ancient tree slowly while Pip darted around me like an excited firefly. When I touched the scaled bark, a deep sadness resonated through my palm. The tree was in pain, and its strength was fading. Standing beneath its wilting canopy, feeling the dormant power of the dragon spirit within, my thoughts crystallized with sudden clarity. This wasn't just any tree, it was the heart of something ancient and powerful. Pip landed softly on my shoulder as I stared up at the dying leaves, then back at the looming castle beyond the glass walls. A fierce smile crossed my face as an idea took shape, not just an escape plan, but something far more significant. My wolf stirred with newfound purpose, sensing the potential of what lay before us. If they wanted to play with ancient magic, they were about to learn they weren't the only ones who could wield it. I pressed my palm against the dragon tree's scaled bark. "I'm getting you out of here," I told both the struggling tree and the tiny fairy who'd risked everything to protect it. "All of us." My wolf stirred in agreement, sensing the rightness of this new purpose. Simple escape wasn't enough anymore, not when I could feel the tree's power, even in its weakened state. If Julian and his people wanted to dabble in ancient magic, they'd soon learn what real power looked like when it was unchained. Saving this dragon spirit might be the key to breaking more than just my own bonds. It could shatter the curse that was slowly killing us all.
Chapter 4. Julian. I've learned to use my wolf form as an escape, though escape makes it sound simpler than the violent, bone-breaking agony of transformation. 3 nights ago, everything changed when the demon that shares my body began fixating on the girl upstairs. Its whispers grew darker, more insistent, fantasies about the taste of her blood, the feeling of draining away her life force. Even now, remembering those thoughts makes me want to tear my own flesh apart. But in my desperation, I stumbled upon something useful. When I transform into a wolf, the demon's grip on my mind loosens. Something about a wolf's simpler consciousness seems to confuse it, pushing it to the edges of my awareness. These days, I spend most nights in wolf form, patrolling the castle grounds. I tell myself I'm just doing my job as guardian of this land, keeping the monsters out. Though lately, I'm not sure if I'm protecting the castle from them or protecting everyone else from what lives inside these walls. There's always something that needs investigating. Claw marks on the east wall, where shadow creatures tried climbing in last week, or the neat rows of dead birds that keep appearing outside the servants' quarters like some twisted offering. But no matter where my patrols begin, I always find myself drawn to the greenhouse. The first time was an accident. I was tracking some slimy horror that had crawled out of the moat, following its trail of black blood and pond scum when I stumbled into the courtyard. That's when I saw her, really saw her, for the first time. Sophia, the girl I had sentenced to death, was doing something completely unexpected. She was living. Her hands were deep in the soil as she smiled and chatted with the empty air around her. What caught my attention wasn't just her smile, though that alone was remarkable in this joyless place. It was the plants around her, responding to her touch in ways that seemed impossible. Their stems slowly straightened, leaves gradually unfurled, reaching toward her like children stretching for their mother's hand. In a castle where everything had been slowly dying for years, this small sign of life felt like witnessing a miracle. I should have turned away immediately and crawled back to my wing to drink myself into familiar numbness. Instead, I found myself sinking deeper into the shadows. Watching her work until dawn forced me to retreat. Watching her has become part of my nightly routine, as much a ritual as the transformation itself. After I deal with whatever horror needs killing, I settle in near the greenhouse. I know how it sounds. A cursed man, wolf, stalking a young woman through glass walls. But in a castle full of nightmares, this small glimpse of normalcy has become my anchor. She arrives at midnight, precise as a clock, and heads straight for what she calls the dragon tree, a massive thing that dominates the center of the greenhouse. She continues her bizarre behavior of talking constantly, but not to herself. She seems to be speaking with someone, or something, that only she can see. Sometimes she laughs at unheard jokes. Other times she argues passionately with empty air, her hands moving in animated gestures. I should find it disturbing. Instead, I'm fascinated, and not just because the demon inside me sees her as prey. She moves through the greenhouse like she owns it, tending to her plants with the easy confidence of someone who chose to be there, not someone trapped within these walls. While the rest of us count down her remaining days with dread, she's in there creating life, chatting with what it seemed to be invisible friends, treating her prison sentence like an extended garden party. Tonight her hair is tied back, showing the delicate curve of her neck, and there's a streak of dirt on her cheek she hasn't noticed. Everything about her radiates life, not the hollow animation that passes for living among the castle's other inhabitants, but something real and stubborn and true. Then she freezes, her hands still buried in the soil. My muscles tighten. Did I make a sound? Move too suddenly? Wolves are naturally quiet, but if the rumors about her supernatural sight are true, maybe she can. She turns and looks straight at me, directly into my eyes through the greenhouse glass. My heart stops, both the human and wolf parts of me going still as stone. Every survival instinct I have screams at me to run. This is bad. If she screams, she waves at me. Not a terrified wave or even a hesitant one. She waves like I'm a neighbor she's spotted across the street, as if there's nothing strange about finding a wolf watching her through greenhouse windows. "I know you're there," she calls out, her voice slightly muffled by the glass. Then she turns back to her plants, talking as casually as if we're having a normal conversation. "You can come in if you want." She pauses, and I can hear the smile in her voice.
"Well, not hard anyway."
I freeze, caught between confusion and disbelief. Is she actually flirting with what she thinks is a wild wolf? Or does she know it's me? And why isn't she afraid? She should be terrified. My wolf instincts scream at me to run while my human side craves answers. The demon stirs too, desperate to know what makes her so different from anyone else in this cursed place. She looks over her shoulder again, raising an eyebrow. "Are you coming in, or are you just going to keep skulking out there all night? Because the whole creepy stalker wolf routine is getting old." Before I can talk myself out of it, I'm already moving toward the greenhouse door.
Chapter 5. Sophia. I'd been watching the wolf for days, though I let him think he was being stealthy. Every night, like clockwork, he'd circle the greenhouse, always pausing at the northwest corner. The garden fairies, notorious gossips that they were, had been keeping me well informed. Everything changed when the dragon tree finally bloomed under my care. As its caretaker, I was granted access to its memories and knowledge, and what I learned turned my world upside down. The true villain wasn't Julian at all. It was his father, the former Alpha King, who had struck a terrible bargain with a demon. When the old king died, the demon's contract passed to Julian, taking control of his body and wreaking havoc across our lands. Through the tree's visions, I saw who Julian really was before the curse, a compassionate prince, with gentle eyes who always put his people first. He had fought against the demon's influence until he was nearly dead from starvation, trying to weaken the creature inside him. Even my intended sacrifice hadn't been his choice. His desperate advisors had forced that decision, thinking it was the only way to save their dying kingdom. Tonight, when I spotted that familiar dark shape gliding past the moonlit greenhouse windows, I decided enough was enough. I pulled the door open and called into the darkness. "You might as well come in. You're making Pip anxious." Pip, my fairy companion perched among the orchids, bristled at this. Despite being barely a foot tall, he managed to look thoroughly offended. "I am not anxious," he declared. "I'm maintaining a healthy sense of caution." "There's a difference." "You've been stress-eating aphids all evening," I pointed out. "That's called pest control," Pip shot back. "And I need the protein for maintaining the wards, thank you very much." The wolf stood frozen in the doorway, and I caught my first real glimpse of him. He was massive, more like something from an ancient legend than any normal wolf. His fur was so black it seemed to absorb the moonlight, and his eyes glowed an otherworldly gray, casting their own light in the darkness. His massive frame was coiled with tension, like a spring ready to snap. But now I understood. This wasn't aggression, but the bone-deep exhaustion of someone locked in an endless internal battle. I settled onto the stone floor, making my movements slow and deliberate. "I know the truth now," I said quietly. "The dragon tree showed me everything. Your father's deal with the demon, how it passed to you, the way you've been fighting it all this time." The wolf's ears twitched toward me, following my words with clear intelligence. Something flickered in those luminous gray eyes, a spark of recognition, maybe even hope. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, me sitting cross-legged on the cold floor, talking softly while the wolf watched. Despite the demon lurking inside him, some deep instinct told me Julian wouldn't harm me. "Your counselors were wrong about you," I said. "The tree showed me who you really are. When my pack offered me as a sacrifice, I thought you were just another power-hungry alpha." "But you're trying to protect everyone, aren't you?" The wolf inched closer, his movements cautious but deliberate. His fierce appearance couldn't hide the desperate hope I saw in his eyes. When he finally drew close enough to touch, I slowly extended my hand. "I understand now," I said softly. "I know who you really are, Julian." The wolf went still at the sound of his name. "You won't hurt me," I added, trying to ease his tension. "Pip's protection spells will make sure of that." "Naturally," Pip chimed in from where he sat cross-legged on my shoulder. "I wasn't chosen to guard the dragon tree for nothing." The wolf hesitated, then briefly touched his nose to my palm, as if testing what would happen. When my skin didn't rot, the tension seemed to drain from his massive frame. He pressed his head into my hands with a sound somewhere between exhaustion and relief, the sound of someone who'd been carrying a crushing burden alone for far too long. His fur was softer than I'd expected, and warm despite the cold night air. As I scratched behind his ears, this fearsome creature leaned against me like the young man he truly was beneath the curse, someone who'd lost everything trying to protect others. We sat together in the quiet greenhouse, where I poured out my heart while the massive wolf listened intently. His ears would prick forward at key moments, and he'd offer soft whines or gentle huffs that somehow felt like perfect responses. Every so often, he'd nudge my hand with his muzzle, or give a low, understanding growl when I spoke of particularly difficult things. For hours I talked, and he remained an attentive companion, his intelligent eyes never leaving my face. When dawn began to paint the sky in shades of purple and gold, he reluctantly pulled away. Before melting back into the shadows, he touched his nose to my hand once more, not a question this time, but a promise.
Chapter 6. Julian. The first time she touched me, I thought I'd finally cracked. After watching everything around me die for 5 years straight, grass shriveling under my feet, horses dropping dead when I tried to ride them, servants trembling as they poured wine from arm's length away, this girl just walked right up and scratched behind my ears like I was a harmless stray. My touch should have killed her on the spot. The demon inside me certainly wanted to. I could feel it twisting in confusion and rage when its death touch failed to work. But I just stood there, dumbstruck, while she gave me a real smile instead of the usual terrified grimace people wore when they realized who I was. That's when I discovered I had zero self-control around her. Every night I'd find myself lurking in the courtyard like some lovesick teenager, hoping she'd pet me again. Pathetic? Absolutely. But try spending 5 years completely cut off from human contact. It creates a hunger you didn't know could exist, makes you desperate for even the smallest touch. She'd talk while tending to the dying dragon tree, her hands bringing life back to its branches. She'd go on about how well it was healing, her excitement almost infectious. Sometimes she'd ask simple questions. Don't these new leaves look stronger today? And wait for me to nod or shake my head. She started calling me Wolf. It was ridiculous, but somehow perfect, stirring something in my chest I couldn't name. The demon hated every second of it, hated her gentle hands in my fur, hated how she'd tear off pieces of bread to share with me, like I couldn't rip her apart if I wanted to. The demon would thrash and snarl inside me, but for the first time in 5 years, it was powerless. After everything, that felt like winning. Then she dropped the bomb. She was planning to leave. She mentioned leaving as casually as commenting on the weather, talking to that fairy of hers, Pip, who I couldn't see but definitely felt when the little pest nipped my ear the first time I doubted he existed. She chatted with him every night like an old friend. Once the tree's strong again, Pip and I will find it a proper home, somewhere with good soil and plenty of sunlight. She talked like she was a guest who could leave whenever she pleased, not someone dragged here to die in a ritual sacrifice. Being Alpha King means making the hard calls, sacrificing one to save thousands, doing the ugly math of leadership because someone has to. The harvest moon was 8 days out, and my advisors wouldn't shut up about preparing the ritual site. They needed her death to break this curse, to stop the blight that was killing our land and everything in it. Common sense said to throw her in the deepest dungeon until we needed her. Instead, I found myself stealing maps from the war room, detailed charts of the mountain passes our scouts used, the safest routes through the borders. I wrote out supply lists, how much water she'd need for 3 days of travel, which foods wouldn't spoil, which border towns had guards who'd look the other way for the right price. I turned into some bizarre fairy godfather, bringing her little gifts: my mother's old music box that played a scratchy waltz, a joke book that supposedly had Pip rolling off his branch laughing, fresh pastries from the kitchens that she'd always split with me, feeding me my half like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You're actually quite sweet," she told me one night, scratching under my chin while I tried not to melt into her touch like some attention-starved mutt. Which, if I'm honest, was exactly what I'd become, not that she needed to know that. My advisors were losing it. Darius cornered me yesterday, babbling about time-sensitive preparations and astrological alignments. I bought myself maybe 2 days by bringing up border disputes, but soon they'd stop buying my excuses and take matters into their own hands. The math was simple: one life against thousands. Her death would end the blight. On paper, it wasn't even a choice, but math couldn't account for her adorable humming while she worked, or how she treated me like a person instead of a monster. It couldn't measure what it meant to be touched again after 5 years of watching everything die at your hands. The demon was getting stronger daily, testing the ward that protected her, searching for weak spots. Soon it would find a way to hurt her, or my advisors would stop waiting, or she'd finish healing that tree and try to escape. Time was running out. Being Alpha King had never felt heavier than when I realized what saving her would cost. Everything I knew about ruling said the kingdom came before one person, even her. My people were dying under this curse, their farms turning to dust, their kids getting weaker every day. My duty, my oath to the crown, everything pointed to one answer. But she'd touched my face in the moonlight and said my name like it meant something more than just a title. She saw past what everyone else feared and found whatever was left of me. To her, I wasn't the cursed king or the demon's puppet. I was just Julian, someone worth of affection. How do you choose between the person who gave you back your humanity and the thousands counting on you to throw that humanity away? My advisors made it sound easy: sacrifice her, save the kingdom. But they didn't understand. Losing her wouldn't just mean losing love, it would mean losing the only proof I had that some part of me was still worth saving.
Chapter 7. Sophia. "Easy there, big guy," I whispered, and I held my breath as the cart lurched to a stop, the ancient dragon tree swaying dangerously in its pot. Julian's massive wolf form stood rigid, his muscles tense beneath dark fur. The rickety garden cart wasn't meant for midnight escapes, and its wobbling wheel threatened to betray us with every turn. "We have to take it slow," I whispered, resting a steadying hand on Julian's shoulder. "One wrong move and we'll lose the tree." I understood his urgency. By dawn, his counselors would discover our plan. But rushing could destroy everything we'd worked for these past weeks. The dragon tree was our only hope of breaking the curse, and its brittle branches wouldn't survive a crash. Pip sagged against my neck, his tiny fairy wings drooping with exhaustion as he maintained the invisibility spell around us. Less talking, more moving, he managed through clenched teeth. Keeping 3 bodies and an enormous tree hidden was clearly draining him. We had maybe 18 hours before the harvest moon, when the counselors expected Julian to hand me over as a ritual sacrifice. He bought us time with excuses, border disputes, sudden illness, but Darius was growing suspicious. Our escape plan was desperate: no real destination beyond somewhere safe from the demon, minimal supplies, and a dying magical tree that might not survive the journey. But what choice did we have? I refused to be dragged to that altar, and I wouldn't let the demon destroy the dragon tree, our last chance at breaking the curse. "Almost there," I breathed as Julian carefully navigated around a stone fountain. The bad wheels squealed softly, making me wince. The castle gates loomed ahead, promising freedom, until movement caught my eye. My heart stopped. Through the darkness, guards swept across the courtyard with torches raised, weapons glinting as they searched. I stood frozen, barely breathing, as the guards passed within feet of us. Julian's fur bristled against my leg, his body tense and ready. The guards looked straight through us, through a massive wolf, a cart, and an ancient tree. Pip's magic held, though I could feel him trembling with effort on my shoulder. Once the guards moved past, I let out a careful breath. We were so close to the gates, to freedom. Just a few more steps. The wheel snapped. The cart pitched sideways, sending the dragon tree lurching toward the stones. Without thinking, I threw myself against the trunk. Pain shot through my shoulder as I caught the tree's weight, but I managed to steady it. Then Pip tumbled from my shoulder with a startled cry. He hit the ground hard, wings splayed, and our invisibility vanished like smoke in the wind.
There, by the gates!
A guard's shout split the night. Julian wrenched free from the harness that tied him to the cart and whirled to face them, positioning himself between me and the approaching soldiers. His growl echoed off the courtyard walls as he bared teeth that gleamed in the torchlight. But it was Darius's appearance that made my blood run cold. He emerged from the shadows holding something that seemed to absorb the darkness around it, a length of cloth that moved with an unnatural life of its own. As he drew closer, I realized with horror that it wasn't cloth at all, but thousands of spiders woven together into a writhing mass. "Stand down," Darius commanded his men. "Remember who he is. Cursed or not, he's still your king, and he'll destroy anyone who touches him." His voice was different somehow, smoother, colder, like he was enjoying this. He turned to Julian, and his expression shifted to something that might have been pity if I didn't know better. Darius said, "My lord, I see my suspicions were correct. This witch has ensnared you with her dark magic, forcing you to help her escape. But don't worry, her wicked deeds end tonight. Tomorrow you and the kingdom will be free." I started to protest, but Darius moved before I could finish talking. The spider fabric flew through the air like a net. The moment it touched Julian, the creature seemed to melt into shadow, wrapping around him in a shroud of darkness. I screamed as Julian collapsed, his massive form hitting the stone hard. I tried to run to him, but rough hands grabbed my arms, dragging me backward. At least I could see his chest still rising and falling. Whatever that thing was, it had knocked him unconscious, not killed him. "What did you do to him?" I screamed at Darius, struggling against the guard's grip. "Where did you get that magic?" The slap caught me across the cheek hard enough to make my ears ring. Stars exploded across my vision. "You filthy witch," Darius snarled, his face twisted with disgust. "Did you really think you could steal him from us? Tonight you'll finally fulfill your only purpose." Darius turned to the guards, his voice sharp with disdain. "Take her to the dungeons, and send that tree to the furnace. This witch might have cursed it. We can't risk it polluting the kingdom after she's dead." I fought against the hands dragging me away. "The tree hasn't been cursed. I've been trying to heal it. If you destroy it, you'll doom everyone." As they hauled me toward the castle's dungeons, one thought formed in my mind with terrifying clarity. Darius wasn't just suspicious of our escape attempt. He knew exactly what we were trying to do, and he'd been planning this ambush for a while. The question was, how did he know?
Chapter 8. Julian. "I am your Alpha and your King," my voice thundered through the dungeon, carrying the full weight of my ancestral power. The command slammed into Darius with crushing force, dropping him to his knees. His entire body trembled as he fought against the Alpha voice that flowed through our bloodline. I should have felt satisfied watching him struggle against my power, but all I could think about was how thoroughly he had trapped me. The silver shackles seared my wrists and ankles, their burning touch keeping me chained to the cold stone wall. When I'd finally regained consciousness after the shadow creature's attack, I'd discovered these restraints, pure silver, the one thing that could contain an Alpha's power. Darius had thought of everything. "My lord," he managed through gritted teeth, still shaking from my command, but somehow staying conscious. "We're trying to protect you from the witch's influence. Can't you see she's clouded your mind?" I almost laughed at the irony. Maybe I was under a spell, but not the kind he imagined. Fighting against my command, Darius pulled himself upright. Sweat dripped down his face as he spoke. The guards caught her communing with invisible demons in the greenhouse, right where she cursed the dragon tree. She's seeking revenge for being chosen as a sacrifice. This foreigner wants to destroy everything we've built, but I won't let that happen. I'll die before I see our kingdom fall to her schemes. Looking at it from the outside, I understood why they were suspicious. A foreign girl marked for sacrifice shows mysterious powers, gets close to the cursed king, and tries to escape with a sacred tree. If I hadn't known Sophia personally, hadn't seen the truth shining in her eyes, I might have drawn the same conclusions. But I did know her. I'd experienced her gentle touch when I was in wolf form, heard the pain in her voice when she revealed what the dragon tree had shown her. Sophia wasn't trying to destroy anything. She was desperately trying to save us all, including me. "He's not himself," Darius called to the guards as he staggered toward the door. "The witch's spell is too strong. Ignore any commands he gives." Darius pulled small wax plugs from his pocket and handed them to the guards, who immediately stuffed them into their ears. "The ceremony begins at midnight," Darius said, his voice heavy with forced formality. "I'll return for you then, my lord. I know you'll never forgive me for this, but I won't stand by and watch you destroy everything for some witch from the redwood forests." The door slammed shut with a thundering finality, leaving me alone with nothing but the dank smell of ancient stone and my darkening thoughts. The demon's voice oozed through my mind like poison. How far the mighty have fallen. The great Alpha King, chained up like a common thief. And all for what? A girl who'll be dead before dawn? I tried to shut him out, but it was useless. The demon was as much a part of me now as my own heartbeat. The demon kept taunting me. "Your father may have been cruel, but at least he understood reality. Power demands sacrifice. But you'd throw away an entire kingdom to save one meaningless life." "She's not meaningless," I growled, knowing I shouldn't engage but unable to stop myself. The demon's laughter rattled through my skull. "She's nothing but a tool, a means to an end. Your father sealed this fate when he made his bargain. Fighting it now only proves your weakness. The curse will devour this land either way. At least this path might leave enough of your people alive to start over." I yanked against the silver shackles again, ignoring the searing pain as they burned deeper into my skin. Somewhere in this castle, Sophia was probably locked in a cell just like mine, counting down the hours until midnight. Soon Darius would drag us both to the ritual circle, expecting me to murder the one person who had seen past my curse and found something worth saving. The demon snarled. "She trusted you completely," his voice dripping with false sympathy. "The innocent little lamb thought her fierce wolf would keep her safe. Instead, you led her straight to the slaughter. How does it feel, knowing your weakness sealed her fate?" I clenched my fists until the silver chains bit deeper into my flesh. The demon was right about one thing. I had failed her. All the signs were there. Darius's suspicious glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I should have seen it coming, should have found a way to protect her, but I'd wanted so desperately to believe we could escape together that I'd ignored every warning. "Your guilt is exquisite," the demon purred, "though not quite as sweet as her terror will be when they drag her to the altar. She'll scream your name, beg for your help, and you'll watch her die knowing you put her there." I leaned back against the freezing stone wall, forcing myself to think clearly. There had to be a solution, some angle I was missing. The situation was dire. My kingdom was slowly dying, poisoned by my father's demonic bargain and the curse that now lived inside me. My people believed the only salvation lay in sacrificing an innocent, the same woman who had somehow taught me to love despite everything. The woman who had shown me the curse could be broken, that we might actually find a way to save everyone. The weight of centuries of tradition and duty pressed down on me. Every alpha before me had put the kingdom's survival first, sacrificing whatever and whoever was necessary. It was what we were bred for, what I'd been trained since childhood to do. But Sophia had awakened something different in me. When I was with her, I wasn't just the cursed king or the demon's tool. I was Julian, someone capable of compassion, of hope, of real love. "Choose wisely," the demon whispered. "The blood moon rises soon, and with it comes her final breath. Will you be the king your people need, or the fool who condemned them all for love?" I let the silver's burning pain focus my thoughts. There was a way to save both Sophia and my kingdom, a solution that would break the demon's power forever and ensure no one else paid for my father's sins. It would cost me everything, but some prices were worth paying. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly, staring up at the shadows dancing across the ceiling. "This ends at midnight."
Chapter 9. Sophia. I steadied Pip as he slumped against my shoulder, his small frame shaking as he caught his breath. He looked exhausted, and I gave him a moment to collect himself. "Whenever you're ready," I said quietly. "Tell me what Darius told you." Pip took a few deep breaths before reciting the message. "A hunger with a crown holds all in pyre. Salvation's found at harvest moon, when the blood that sees makes the fire bloom." I mulled over the words. The hunger with the crown had to refer to the demon, that much was obvious, but the rest of the message was frustratingly vague. What did blood that sees or blooming fire have to do with anything? "Any ideas what it means?" I asked Pip, already knowing I might regret it. "Well," he said, fussing with his wing. Blood that sees. Maybe it's about eyeball soup. My cousin Poppy's a huge foodie and—" "Pip," I cut in, rubbing my forehead. "Let's focus here," he grumbled, but kept thinking as he paced along my shoulder. "What about fortune tellers? They use blood sometimes, right? Maybe when they see the future, their crystal balls burst into flames or something." I was about to dismiss his wild theory when something clicked. Blood that sees, not blood with eyes, but blood with the power of sight. "That's it," I said, the pieces finally falling into place. "What's it?" Pip asked, but I was already grabbing his tiny shoulders in excitement. "I need your help with something important," I said quickly. "Something that could change everything." Pip's eyes narrowed. "Oh no, I know that tone. Whatever dangerous thing you're about to suggest, count me out." "The furnace room," I said, watching Pip's face shift from wary to horrified. "We need to get to the dragon tree. I need one of its fruits." "Are you insane?" Pip's wings fluttered in agitation. "The place is swarming with guards, and in case you forgot, furnaces are hot enough to cook a fairy alive." "Listen," I said, "I think I understand the prophecy now, but I need—" "No way. Find someone else for your crazy mission." We stared each other down until Pip's resolve finally weakened. He let out a long sigh. "If I die doing this," he muttered, "I'm coming back to haunt you, and I'll be the most annoying ghost you've ever met." He took off through the small window near the ceiling, his complaints fading as he flew into the night. Alone again, I couldn't stop wondering how Darius had known our every move. Julian and I had been so careful, speaking only in whispers, yet somehow Darius had stayed one step ahead. The screech of rusted hinges broke through my thoughts as the dungeon door opened. 2 guards entered, torchlight throwing their shadows against the walls. They hauled me to my feet, their grip tight enough to leave bruises. The cold autumn air hit me as they dragged me outside. The harvest moon hung above, full and blood-red in the night sky. They forced me down a torch-lit path that cut through the forest. With each step, my sense of dread grew stronger. When we reached the clearing, my worst fears came true. Torches circled the space, illuminating a massive stone altar in the center. Its surface was stained dark, and I didn't want to think about what had left those marks. Darius stood by the altar in black robes, with other counselors lined up beside him, their faces stern in the flickering light. But it was Julian who made my heart stop. Whatever Darius did to him with those spiders had Julian looking like death. Worse than death. His skin was gray and waxy, dark circles ringed his eyes, and he swayed on his feet like he might collapse at any second. Silver shackles encircled his wrists and ankles, and the skin around them was raw and bleeding. In his trembling hands, he held a curved dagger.
Place her on the altar,
Darius commanded, his voice carrying that smug satisfaction that made me want to punch him in his stupid face. The guard shoved me onto the cold stone, and I had to bite back a yelp as the rough surface scraped against my skin. I lay there, staring up at that blood-red moon, when a familiar squeak drew my attention. There, at the base of the altar, stood Pip, looking like he'd been cleaning chimneys. His usually pristine wings were gray with soot, but his eyes sparkled with triumph as he began climbing up toward me, too exhausted to fly. "Did you?" I started to whisper. "Called in some favors with the milk fairies in the kitchen," he panted, settling next to my ear. "They managed to slip something special into the furnace workers' dinner. Let's just say they'll be stuck in their chamber pots for the next few hours." Relief flooded through me. "And the tree?" Pip reached into his tiny satchel and pulled out a red fruit the size of a strawberry. "Safe and sound. Here, eat this quick before anyone notices." I turned onto my side, blocking the fruit from view, and popped it into my mouth. It tasted like sunshine and wildfire, warm and bright and alive. The moment I swallowed, I felt something shift inside me, like a door opening in a room I didn't know existed. Darius said, "Bring our king closer." The guards dragged Julian forward until he stood right beside the altar, towering over me. Up close, I could see the tremor in his hands, the way his chest barely rose and fell. Whatever the demon was doing to him, it was killing him slowly. Julian raised the dagger above his head with shaking arms. His eyes met mine for just a second, and in that brief moment, I saw past the exhaustion and pain to the Julian I knew. "Run," he mouthed, so quietly I almost missed it. Then his entire expression changed. The weakness vanished, replaced by a terrible, desperate determination. His grip on the dagger steadied, and with mounting horror, I realized what he was planning. He turned the blade toward his own chest. Time seemed to freeze. Before I could scream, a voice echoed in my mind. "Call upon me," the dragon spirit whispered. "We are bound together now." The dragon tree fruit I'd swallowed minutes ago had worked. Without hesitation, I reached for that burning presence inside me. "I call upon your spirit, dragon," I said, my teeth clenched. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Fire exploded through my veins like liquid lightning, filling every cell in my body with power I'd never imagined possible. My skin began to glow with an inner light, and when I stood up on the altar, flames wreathed around me, like I was a midnight sun burning all the darkness away. Julian's knife stopped mid-swing, his eyes going wide. Around us, chaos erupted. The guards stumbled backward, shouting and pointing. The counselors scattered like startled vultures. But my eyes were fixed on the monstrous thing erupting from Julian's chest, a twisted mass of shadow with multiple gaping mouths, each filled with decaying fangs. The demon was fleeing its dying host, desperate to escape before Julian's death could drag it down too. It hung in the air for maybe half a second, searching for a new victim to possess, and that's when everything clicked into place. A hunger with a crown holds all in pyre. Salvation's found at harvest moon, when the blood that sees makes the fire bloom. I was the blood that sees, and now, under the harvest moon, I was making the dragon fire bloom inside of me. The demon shot toward one of the fleeing counselors, but I was faster. I launched myself off the altar and grabbed the demon with all my strength. It felt like holding putrid rot, but the dragon fire coursing through me protected me from its touch. The demon shrieked. As the flames began to consume it, it thrashed in my grip, trying to escape, but I held tight. "Burn," I said. The demon dissolved into nothing, leaving only the smell of sulfur and charred air. But apparently, we weren't done with the fireworks yet. Darius let out a scream that was part rage, part agony, and then he was burning too. Real flames were licking up his robes and consuming his flesh. He fell to his knees, still screaming, and I suddenly understood. He'd been the demon's familiar, its eyes and ears in the human world. That's how he'd known about our plans, how he'd always been one step ahead. The demon had been feeding him information, and now that it was dead, their connection was killing him too. The flames around me flickered and died as the dragon spirit settled deeper into my bones. I felt different, stronger, more complete, somehow, like I'd been walking around my whole life missing a piece of myself and had finally found it. Julian dropped the dagger and stumbled toward me. He tore the silver shackles like they were made of paper. Without the demon draining him, his normal strength had returned. His color was already returning, the grayish tint fading to reveal warm skin. When he reached me, he didn't hesitate. He pulled me into his arms and held me so tight I could barely breathe, his face buried in my hair. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered against my ear, his voice rough with emotion.
I thought the demon would make me. Sophia, I'm so sorry. I should have told you what was happening. I should have trusted you to help me figure it out.
"Hey," I said, pulling back just enough to look at his face. His hands came up to cup my cheeks, thumbs brushing away tears I didn't realize I'd been crying. "I love you," he said, the words tumbling out like he couldn't hold them back any longer. I kissed him before he could finish the sentence, pouring every ounce of relief and fear and desperate love into it. He tasted like coming home after a long, terrible journey. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you too," I said, "even when you're being a self-sacrificing idiot." He laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "Does this mean you'll forgive me for almost stabbing myself in the heart?" "I'm thinking about it," I said, but I was smiling as I said it. Around us, the clearing was eerily quiet. The remaining guards and the counselors had fled, and all that was left was ash where Darius had been standing. The torches still burned, casting shadows on the trees, but the evil feeling that had hung over this place was gone. We were free. Finally, truly free. A small cough interrupted our moment. "Excuse me," Pip said, hovering nearby with his arms crossed. "Not to ruin this touching scene, but perhaps we should deal with everything else?" He was right. The demon might be gone, but we had a kingdom to put back together. Julian straightened, though he kept one arm around me. His voice rang out clear and strong, his true voice, not the demon's twisted version filled with cruelty. "The curse is broken. Those who serve Darius out of fear or manipulation are pardoned, but those who knowingly aided his crimes will face justice." "And the dragon tree?" I asked, remembering the ancient being that had helped save us all. "Will be restored to its rightful place in the heart of the Darkholme forest," Julian declared. "No more hiding our kingdom's magic in dark places." Pip landed on my shoulder, preening proudly. "Does this mean I get a promotion? Royal Hero has a nice ring to it." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "How about Royal Pest? I'll take it," he said cheerfully, "as long as it comes with extra honeycakes." Above us, the harvest moon's red glow had softened to gentle silver, watching over a kingdom being reborn. The dragon spirit's warmth pulsed contentedly within me, and Julian's hand was steady in mine. We had a lot of work ahead of us, but for the first time in a long while, I felt truly hopeful about the future. "Come on," Julian said softly, tugging my hand. "Let's go home." And so we did, walking together toward a dawn that promised to be brighter than any before. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment, like, and subscribe for more.